Good evening, everyone, and thanks for joining this, I suppose, information webinar on our Masters in Work and Organisational Psychology or Behaviour here in DCU Business School. So I will run through the programme. It'll be a bit of a whistle-stop tour, and I'll kind of cover a few things. But please, do feel free to jump in and ask questions or to put them in the chat. And I'll make sure there's some time at the end as well, just to go through any questions that you might have. So I suppose just to say that this is the longest running programme of its kind in Ireland. And, I suppose there's been huge demand for the programme in recent years in particular. We used to run the programme every second year, but we're now have an annual intake. I suppose to give you an overview of the programme, to look at some of the outcomes that our graduates report to us, what it's like to be on the course, and then obviously just some time for some Q&A. I think the first thing to clear up, and it's important if you are thinking about applying for the programme.
Yeah, so I'd like to know if fucking Holly's home now at this stage.
Sorry, so we have the Masters in Work and Organisational Psychology and Masters in Work and Organisational Behaviour. It's in fact the exact same course and the same student experience for all students, no matter which programme you're registered on. The only reason that we have two titles is for professional accreditation reasons. So the Psychology Society of Ireland do not allow students to register on a Masters with a psychology title unless they have a recognised undergraduate degree or a higher diploma or conversion course in psychology. Most of our programme, about 2/3 of our programme students do not have a background in psychology, and it's about 1/3 of students who do. So it's very much the same experience. The only difference is that you have a different title on your parchment and that you cannot register with the Psychological Society of Ireland if you graduate with the Masters in Work and Organisational Behaviour. But in terms of the assessment, you're shared in teams. We don't distinguish between the students in the class, and actually our evidence would suggest that people from both programs go into very similar roles and in similar organisations. But one of the things that having these kind of two different backgrounds for students means that we have, I suppose, a very diverse mix in the classroom, something I'll come back to in a few minutes. So to give you an idea of what we cover in the course, in year one, we kind of set people up with a really good foundation in organisational psychology and behaviour. So you have a kind of a larger module in organisational psychology where we cover things from what work is, what careers are, but particularly focusing on motivation, well-being, trust, and decision-making. And we also kind of consider these issues in terms of the context of the future of work. And that module then is supported by the main kind of business or strategic module that we have in the programme. So it's all very well in terms of understanding how to support employees' motivation, to support their well-being, to build trust in organisations, to manage organisational change. But you need to be able to build a business case around that and understand how that feeds into the overall organisational kind of strategy and kind of mission and values and so on. So that's the focus for the first semester of year one. In year two, then we have a module that kind of zooms in on the role of leaders in organisations, and in particular, how they manage change processes and how they bring people through change. And then the final piece in first year is to support students on their journey towards the dissertation. So we have a research methods module that also exposes, I suppose, students to really kind of state-of-the-art research in our field and helps them to develop ideas for projects that they might undertake in their own organisation, or certainly if they're working independently, how they collect data and answer questions that they're particularly interested in. In year two, then it kind of the programme becomes more applied. So we look at things like learning and development, how we support that in organisations, and how we develop strategies that support the learning and development of employees. We also look at how, I suppose, psychology can really support effective selection and assessment and talent management within the organisation. And we're also particularly interested in the relational aspects of people in organizations. So thinking about how we manage teams, how we build teams, both, you know, traditionally and across remote and virtual contexts. And we have a very, very significant expertise in the area of trust in organizations. So we have some of the kind of most well-respected trust scholars from, around the world based in DCU. So we have a particular focus on that. In the final semester, taught semester of the master's program is very much a kind of a skills-based modules where we learn kind of coaching skills, consulting skills, and, you know, ethical practice, but also becoming a reflective practitioner in this area. So it's a lighter semester that allows you to kind of weave everything together, but also gives you a bit of space to kind of finish up on the dissertation. Through the program, as part of our kind of accreditation by the Psychological Society of Ireland, we are required to support students in their psychometric certification. So we cover test user ability training, which is the first kind of step to be recognised as a kind of psychometrics practitioner. So we cover that kind of starting in year 2, and all students who graduate from the program have a recognised certification in test user ability training. There is an option. We don't include the personality training in the program because not everyone is driven to have that particular certification, but we have an arrangement with our delivery provider to support students in closing that off if they wish. As I mentioned, there is a dissertation. It's a master's program. You get to do this on any topic that you want. You are supported in the development of a proposal in year 1, and at that point you're assigned a supervisor who guides you through the process. And students typically submit their dissertation in the June at the end of their 2nd year of study. So I suppose I've mentioned some of the people who are involved. I teach onto the program myself. I've been teaching the organisational psychology module for over a decade, but I'm supported by many colleagues across the school. As I've mentioned, we have some trust experts like Lisa and Finian. Professor Patrick Flood and Janine both teach our leadership and change module. But we have, I suppose, a really positive student experience in terms of the support that they get from their staff. But I think it's really important to emphasize that we are very much research active. We are undertaking ongoing research on a regular basis. So we try to bring really state-of-the-art knowledge to our classes, rather than kind of just looking at I suppose, traditional text. We are very much bringing what's the current thinking on matters like the future of work, virtual teams, trust, organizational change, work-life balance. We really ensure that we're bringing the latest thinking to you in that regard. It's very much, you know, a learning community, and we always stress that people learn from each other in the classroom as much as they learn from us standing at the top of the classroom. We do envisage this as a program that can make that through our graduates, we make work a better place for people. I suppose in line with the DCU mission around transforming lives and societies, we really see that people spend most of their time at work, and we need to make workplaces better places to be. But we very much stress that we can give you the thinking, but also students learn very much from each other in the classroom. So we encourage people to, you know, come to class, use their voice, share their experiences, and to support each other. We really emphasize reading. So we support students in directing them to things that we think that they should be reading or they might find interesting. We don't use a core text. As I've said, we're really looking at state-of-the-art research. And we want our graduates to be confident, evidence-based practitioners when they leave us. It's, I suppose, worth mentioning that we don't use any exams in the programme. We are entirely continuous assessment based. Mostly the vast majority of your marks come from individual assessment, but to support that learning community, we do have some group assessment. And I think people can fear it a little bit, but certainly my own students who just finished their module last semester said that one of the highlights was their group assessment. So it's something that we ensure is a positive experience for all. I think like sometimes you're deciding, is this program for me? And, you know, I'm happy to have one-to-one chats with anyone interested in applying for the program, but I think this program can be for anyone. And that sounds like a sort of vague statement to make, but I've been teaching onto the program for over a decade, and there is really such a diverse mix of student profiles, and they come from all sorts of industries and all levels. And we have very, very vast differing age groups as well represented in the classroom. And that's what makes this program special, in a way that we all bring something different. We all learn something different from each other. But, you know, tech backgrounds, pharma backgrounds, non-for-profit, public sector, private sector, people from finance and insurance. This year we have a number of the legal profession is very much represented. So we do get a very, very diverse mix of industries, and that creates a very positive learning environment. I think why students choose to do the course has also varied. We have students who really want to make quite a significant change in their career, and they want to move into this area as something that they have increasingly become interested in over the course of their careers. We have people who see it as a mechanism through which they can advance their careers, because they see that within their organizations that the next step, it really is around managing people or leading big teams. And that's not so much about learning a little bit about this and a little bit about that. It's really zooming in on understanding people and being able to inspire them, but also, you know, to build trust, to get your people to trust you, but also to take responsibility for things like their motivation, you know, their performance, and in particular, their well-being and managing diversity and all of the things that go with that. So certainly in recent years, we've seen a trend of students who are finding themselves managing teams, who are looking for something to support them in that, to be effective managers. So people don't necessarily come from a HR or an L&D or an organizational psychology background. They recognize the value of understanding people, and that this program can help them to unlock their potential and to support people that they're managing. So I suppose this is really just a flavor. This program, as I said, has been around for a very long time, but these are some of the organizations that our graduates are working and have moved into, you know, roles in these organizations. We have, I suppose it's worth mentioning, that people who feel like they want to work on their own or to set up their own business in like a coaching business or consultancy certainly are drawn to this program. So they would represent a certain group in the course. But we have lots of large organizations where our graduates are represented in some numbers. And of course, as I mentioned, the non-for-profit sector, charities, like governmental departments. On Garda Síochána, we've had people from so I suppose just a huge spectrum of organizations represented within the classroom, which you know, I suppose makes it a very rich learning environment. In terms of, I suppose, pragmatics, the course runs one evening a week. And I think I said on a previous slide that it's really important that you're there. And, you know, we've had this kind of quasi experiment where we taught this program online for a year, and we had students who were in first year, and then their second year was online. And we had students who had their first year online and then went into the classroom. And undoubtedly, the experience of immersing yourself, of making that journey to DCU every week, to going into a classroom and to be surrounded by your peers, is infinitely better than doing it through like we are now over a screen. So we do really encourage you know, class attendance, class participation, and it's one afternoon or evening a week. So if I'm talking to anyone who's interested in the program, I always say have the support to be there, whether that's at work or family or both. You will get so much more out of the program by, you know, throwing yourself into it. For September, our intake will be on a Wednesday. Classes will run from 3 to 8 o'clock with a break in between the two modules. We do support learning through our virtual learning environment, which is known as Loop, but view it as it's a supplement, and it can really help you to, I suppose, prepare you for class, but also to refresh your memory. So it's a great resource where all of your study notes, your assessments, your ability to chat with your colleagues can all be supported through our online learning environment. And as I said, you know, assessment is really a critical method of learning, and there's huge opportunities to, you know, to be agents in that learning in terms of deciding what you are going to do your assessment on. So there's, in some modules, quite a bit of scope for you to decide, I'm going to become an expert on this particular topic, and you're given the freedom to choose the topics that you might cover for assessment. So that's just a snapshot of what the VLE looks like. You know, like we give a huge amount of support in terms of assessment. You know, we understand that people are working and that things happen at home and at work that can make it difficult to meet deadlines. So we're very much an adult learning environment, and we support that as much as possible. So I think in terms of just sometimes people have questions around teamwork, we see it as a very fundamental part of our learning community. We have people who develop friendships for life on this program, but we do support it through, you know, team contracts and ensuring that people have very clear expectations. But those teams can be invaluable networks to people in their careers that extend far beyond the life of the program. And I think if you get to speak to some of our graduates, they can certainly attest to that. Excuse me. I should also mention that we have one of the first kind of, in a university setting, virtual reality labs. So our Column Delves lab allows students to do I suppose team building exercise to learn about the role of virtual reality in future workplaces, but also provides an invaluable opportunity for our students to develop particular skills. So we have a suite of activities where people can, you know, present a TED talk, and their presentation, their speaking can all be analysed and fed back to the student so that they can learn how to develop their presentation skills. There are interview skills. There's you know, empathy building training, diversity training. These are all things that we can use to, I suppose, augment and supplement the learning that's done through the program. I suppose just to give one quick example of a module and how we run it. So this is my module on organisational psychology. I typically will have top 11 topics over the course of the module. Each topic is accompanied by a 20 to 25 minute video ahead of class, which I always call my 3 key concepts. So these are 3 key concepts that you should be familiar with and understand before coming to class. It's then supported with reading. And when you come to class, it's very interactive, very discussion based, problem solving, chatting things through as a whole group and chatting things through in small groups. And students always say they never notice the time flying by. They can't believe that the class is over by the time we get to the end. But so I always think that's a good sign that people are engaged and enjoying the learning. In terms of this is a bigger module, so it's kind of worth the size of 2 other modules. And I say that because there's more assessment in it. So there's a group assessment, an individual assessment, and then like online participation, which is also part of the overall mark. And these are just samples of reading. So this is how we kind of structure our reading for the module. So like something that you must read, something that's nice to read. And if you're addicted to the topic, this is something else. So we kind of structure our reading so that you know what is core and what is, you know, I suppose at your choosing, at your choice. So I think like that's my whistle stop tour of the program. I'm sure there might be some questions in terms of, I suppose, the value of the program or specific questions on content. So I'd be happy to take any of those that you might have.
Hi, my name is Victoria. I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you. Yep.
Perfect, thank you. So I unfortunately was, I started to join the meeting like in probably 10 minutes later because I had to update the app. So
Okay.
I missed the part when there is like a distinction between the psychology and the behavior. Is there two different courses? Is there like a separation?
Yeah, I'll answer that again. I'll answer that again briefly for anyone else who might have missed it. It's exactly the same program, the same classroom, same module, same assessment. You are not distinguished once you register, you're in the same classroom. The reason that there is a difference is because the Psychological Society of Ireland, like in other countries, doesn't allow students without a recognised qualification in psychology to join a master's program. So you have to have an undergraduate degree or a higher diploma that recognises you as a psychologist before you join a postgraduate study. But I suppose we saw a huge demand for the program from non-psychologists. And so we have a master's in organisational behaviour as well. So the only difference is your parchment. And it's your registration will be on either the psychology or the behavior, but your experience within the classroom is the same. And we actually deliberately mix people from a psychology background with those from a non-psychology background in teams, because actually they have things to learn from each other.
So just to be sure that I understand correctly, so if I have a background in psychology, then at the end of the study of the course, I will have as a title organizational psychologist. Is that correct?
Yes,
okay,
exactly.
clear.
If you have a background in psychology, you should apply for DC 508. And if you do not have a background in psychology, you should apply for DC 957. And I know it's confusing for people. I completely understand, but it's an absolute requirement of our accreditation that we do it that way.
Thank you very much. I have just one more question. It's about like you were talking about encouraging the in-class learning, and that's absolutely fine. I was just wondering if there is a reason why the person cannot attend. Will there be like a registration or something that people can go and still like see what happened during the class? Let's say that the person cannot attend in person.
We do have an online learning environment, but we don't promise people that you get the full experience if you don't go to class. So we do have some facilities that you could Zoom in, or for instance, that's one of the reasons if you have a team, they can Zoom you in and you can listen. Like we've certainly experimented with different methods, but no matter how sophisticated the technology, if you're at home and people are in the class, it's just not the same experience. And we don't want people to get into the habit of having the experience that way every week. But yeah, we can certainly, for when people are sick or there's something that happens, we can do things to connect people in. But it's certainly not something that we absolutely guarantee, and we certainly don't encourage it as a way of thinking about the program.
Absolutely, that makes sense. Thank you very much.
No problem. Thanks, Victoriana. David, you have your hand up for a while.
Thanks, Isil. Sorry, is it Yusult or how do I pronounce it?
Yeah, don't worry. I should have made that a little bit clearer. Yeah, Isolt. It causes me lots of problems. But
I'm pronouncing it in the Dundalk accent, so no matter what it'll be. But no, thanks so much for that. Mine are just a couple of quick ones, kind of building on what Victoriana asked about just now. But it's kind of just under the umbrella of career prospects post the course. I know you spoke about that the course itself is in high demand, but I was just wondering if you can give just more insight into the demand for graduates itself. What you're seeing from alumni and things. And I know that might be difficult because it's such a diverse cohort, etc. And then the second bit then was maybe it just links to, I'm coming from a psychology background myself with the base degree. So then further to that, do you see any difference in the actual demand from a psychology background versus the organizational behavior, if that's okay?
I think the answer is no, we don't. I mean, I think certainly people who have a psychology background can go for roles with psychology in the title, and that will be, I suppose, that's becoming increasingly regulated, or is due to be more regulated by the HSE actually, who will but to be honest, they are diverse. I think you mentioned that there is a diversity, but I really can't kind of emphasize enough how many of our graduates come back and say they're in roles because of the course. And it's all very well for me to sit here and say that, but normally when I have these kind of questions, I say, do you know what, I'll put you in touch with some of our graduates, because they will tell you what it's done for them, and it's not me just on a sales pitch. But say for instance, like there's a role I mentioned Rabobank there on one of my slides, and we have someone who's working, and they have a role because they did this program as a ways of working coach, which sounds like, you know, it's certainly the type of role that we wouldn't have had maybe even 5 years ago. But certainly she would attribute that to what she had learned on the program, what she started doing. So came from a kind of a project management background and is now working with teams across the organization in terms of supporting them in kind of dealing with the challenges of hybrid working and flexible working. And then I have someone else who emailed us recently to say that they work in a pharma company, they had been promoted, and they directly attributed it to you know, to their experiences on the program. And I think it's, yes, there's a career progress piece, but there's also an approach to work and a confidence that people get about work and dealing with people. So we've had, I suppose, someone on the program who's in first year now, and I can put you in touch with them. His manager did the program a couple of years ago, maybe 3 years ago. And because of their experience of how the manager changed as a manager by doing the program, they decided that they would come and do the program, because they said it was such a positive. There were so many positives to be managed by someone who was learning all about, you know, learning about this. So I think, yes, there's career progress, but one of the things that our current students and graduates say is that they can put everything into practice straight away, that they're bringing ideas away with them and making changes in their organization. But David, if you're interested, please feel free to follow up with me, and I can put you in touch with some graduates. I always feel it's much better coming from them, you know, than it is from me. But yeah, like I certainly think that we don't have graduates who are, you know, who are out of work. Some people do decide that this is the program that helps them to go out on their own and to make changes. And so it depends, I suppose, on what you want to do, but I can certainly direct you towards some examples.
Thanks, Susan. Yeah, thanks for that. That's great. But just one bit component of it, do you see when this is fed back from graduates that there is a demand for that kind of scientific approach, evidence-based, systematic, that kind of language? That is a kind of demand that is actually out there.
I think the demand is like, yeah, I think so. There is absolutely a demand in, you know, what should we be doing and what is the best practice. I think best practice is normally the language that we hear more of, but what we're trying to strengthen that, because best practice can sometimes be buzzwords that are out there, and we can see trends come and go in the media, particularly in terms of workplace management, employee well-being, employee trust. You know, there's things that are old wine in new bottles. They're just rebranded over and over. But what we do say is that, you know, we want you to be evidence-based. That's what's going to differentiate you from someone else who's out there, you know, on the market. And I think it's, you know, the language that we put around that, the evidence base that we give you, that can, I suppose, as I said, kind of give you an edge. But there is, and I think particularly in terms of people, in terms of the radical changes that we've had in workplaces in even the last couple of years, there is a thirst for people with knowledge in this space, and we are seeing new roles emerge in organizations as a result.
Brilliant. That's great. Thanks.
No
Much appreciated.
Ruth, you had your hand up for a while.
I did. Hi, thanks very much, Yusuf, for your time today. I have, I suppose, a bit of a strange question, but I see from the companies that you popped up there, quite a few of those be quite cagey about confidentiality. And seeing as a lot of the course is about your experience in the workplace, I'm just wondering how people navigate that throughout the course.
Yeah, I mean, we don't force people to speak. I'm a psychologist, so I know people learn in different ways. So that's rule number one. You're never forced to speak or to contribute or to share things that you don't feel comfortable with. So I think, you know, like that's in recognition that people learn in different ways, and I absolutely respect that. So there's never a sense that you have to participate or that you're assessed in any way based on your participation. But at the same time, there is a kind of a culture or a circle of trust in the classroom. We expect people when they learn, you know, Chatham House rules, that if you do share something, that's there for the learning of this group and this group only, and not shared beyond. I've never come across any significant issues. I did have someone from an organisation that was on that list at some point. I would say you know, I have so many examples, but I can't share them for that reason. But that didn't detract from their, you know, experience, because they were thinking about how, or looking for similar experiences or contrasting it with other experiences and seeing how other organizations handled it much better than my organization would have handled it. But everyone does learn something. But I hope that kind of reassures you there is a lot of sharing, but it's at your choice. You're in control of that, and never pressure to share anything that you don't want to. But there's plenty shared. So it's an interesting place to be.
Thanks very much.
No problem. Agnes?
Yeah, lovely. Thank you very much for taking the time to talk to us today.
No problem.
I'd have two sort of questions. One is around the coaching. If you wouldn't mind just maybe go in a bit more detail of sort of what level of coaching is covered. Like, is it ICF standard, or is it more sort of the basic understandings? Or
it's a basic understanding in terms of what kind of coaching skills or mentoring skills you might use, and it can also depend on expertise. So we would have a coach, someone with a coaching experience, deliver the module, but it can vary. So for instance, I mentioned my colleague Janine Bosak, who teaches on the leadership and change module. And her background, she was trained as a coach in Germany. So she uses a particular approach to coaching, systemic coaching, that maybe someone who else is teaching the module, you know, wouldn't take that approach. So it's very much, it's not that, you know, if you want to become a coach, like I would suggest doing a coaching qualification. But I suppose it's in recognition that when we work with people, we need to have these skills. We need to have some skills in terms of helping people to think about their priorities, you know, whether there are changes or transitions they need to navigate, and, you know, just in general in terms of managing performance or supporting people's development, that coaching is a good skill to apply to those kind of manager employee relationships. So for instance, I've done a lot of research on the return to work after maternity leave. And, you know, coaching is invaluable in those kind of transition situations, but lots of organizations can't or won't support an individual with a coach on these occasions. But a manager having some knowledge of these kind of coaching skills can use it to great advantage, or to have much more productive and open conversations. So it's really about supporting some of the other things that you're learning, but it's by no means a recognized qualification in coaching.
Yeah. Okay. And then you showed one of the slides, you showed sort of roles that you can go into. It was like people leader, people manager, and so on. Would you see also this going sort of, rather than looking down the hierarchy in terms of leading a team, would you see this being very much supportive going up the way, as in, you know, leadership, sort of organizational executives supporting? Or is it?
We have a lot of, like, we have software engineers, we have school principals, we have doctors who manage their own practices, we have, you know, people. So we have very much a cohort of the class that are there because they are managing people and they have never had any depth of knowledge or training or understanding of that area. It's very different for them. So we would certainly have a section of the class, and that's their motive for being there. But we also have people who, you know, they've been working in L&D, or they've been working in organizational change, or, you know, like, so there's lots of different motives for being on the program.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you.
Great, no problem. Thanks, Lisa.
Hi there, how are you? So a couple of questions. When we complete the course, are you an organisational psychologist, or is there additional work or anything that needs to be done on top of that,
Yeah,
or how does it work?
So we do connect you in with the Division of Work and Organisational Psychology. So if you have your undergrad degree or some recognised graduate basis for registration in psychology, and you do the programme, yes, but you go on what's called a conditional register. So before you're recognised as a chartered organisational psychologist, you have to undergo supervision in practice. So you can work, but you're conditionally registered as a chartered organisational psychologist. We usually bring in PSI, and we do bring in CIPD. I should say that the program is accredited by CIPD as well. But we, from a PSI perspective, we do bring them in to guide students in terms of how they pursue that kind of that chartership route. But yeah, this is the qualification you need to enter that register. Brilliant.
And the time frame to be chartered is, do you have any idea how long
2 years.
the process is? It's 2 years on top of the masters. Okay, great. And one other question with regards to the strategy and the psychometric testing, is there anywhere we can see a breakdown of what's actually covered in that? Because I'd love to just see what's covered in
the strategy module.
The strategy and the the testing, the
psychometrics, yes.
Psychometric testing, yes.
Yeah, if I can send those to you. They're usually on the DC if you have the module code, but actually I'm just going to write my email address if you want to follow up with me.
Brilliant, thank you.
So currently, so it's that's my email address for everyone. With the psychometrics, we currently have a company called Enact that deliver it, but we have to get proposals on that from different delivery providers every couple of years. But currently it's Enact, and they cover test user ability training. So that's what we cover on the psychometrics. And the psychometrics module is also blended with kind of support for the dissertation in terms of statistical analysis, which one you're doing. So we kind of put those into one module. And I can send you on the strategy, organization, and innovation outline.
That'd be brilliant. Lovely. Thank you.
No problem. Thanks. Emma?
Great, thank you. Just a question in terms of entry requirements and stuff for it. So if you do have an undergrad, I know this is online as a list of stuff that you need, but is there a huge demand? Like how many places are there versus generally how many applicants? What's the likelihood? Like what kind of helps in terms of applications?
Experience helps. So we don't, this is not a program to be filled with recent graduates. We take only a very limited number of recent graduates, and so we do look for an undergraduate degree, but actually it's work experience, and having that diversity is an aspect of the program that we really try to nurture. But I think, to be honest, most if you meet the requirements, we usually make space to accept students. So we have about 40 people on the program each year.
Oh, great. Okay. Yeah, perfect. And just in terms of like the type of commitment and stuff with the assignments, I can see there, and I went through each of the modules just to see in terms of like what assignments to do and how often they're doing. Like, how do people find it balancing it with full-time work? Like, that's probably,
I suppose I'm going to give you a typical psychologist answer to that one, and it depends.
Yeah, fair.
It depends on how good your time management skills are.
Yeah.
We always laugh because our students will have their assessment deadlines in September. And they could spread it out, but typically they wait until 2 weeks before it's due, and then they're having to devote their entire weekend, and they're not getting any sleep at night, and they're complaining to me. But I'm like, well, you've known since September it was coming. But anyway, no, I suppose I jest, but I think typically, if I'm honest, I would say that you're looking at, especially during term time. So remember that this program has 11 weeks before Christmas and 11 weeks after Christmas. So it's a less than half the year that you're actually in classes. But while you are in semester, and when your end of semester assessments are due, I would say you're in classes on a Wednesday. You're probably spending an evening and maybe a good chunk of one of your weekend days preparing for class. Like, it will vary. You'll have a weekend and you don't do something. You'll also have maybe a group presentation or something to prepare. But that used to be that students had to come into DCU to meet. And now they meet on Zoom or Teams or whatever platform they want. But I do think you have to find the day in the week that's going to suit you to keep on top of everything.
Yeah, no, that's fine, because say currently, and there's actually a few from my class on the call as well. Say for the month of March, we have something due every weekend, every Sunday for the month of March. So that's like the 5th, the 12th, the 19th, and the 31st and stuff. So there's quite a huge commitment there, and especially if people work full time. So I presume they're kind of spread out across, like, you know, there's 2 modules coming in.
2 modules. So typically, so Malcolm teaches the other module at the same time as me, and we make sure that those dates are spread out as much as possible. So I typically have a group presentation the week after reading week. So it's a week after you haven't had, you know, classes. And then my assignment is due. Like I usually, this year I put it maybe 2 days before Christmas, so that and you could switch off and not give yourself indigestion on Christmas Day. So we do make a huge effort, and like it's really important. We know the kind of people who are in our program, and life happens while you're on this program. And every year there are issues that emerge, and we support students as much as possible, you know, to get through the program. And, you know, we take, I suppose, it's very much a supportive culture, not one that's like, well, you were 4 minutes late. We don't adopt that kind of approach. So we really want you to get over the line and support you to do that.
Okay, so there are full-time people working while doing the course.
The vast majority of the classroom are working full-time.
And then is there scope, just on what you had mentioned there, and this is my last question, sorry, just in terms of, you know, I suppose if you get so far within a year, you get the first year done, and then kind of second year is maybe creeping up, is there options to potentially defer a semester or something like that?
Someone who defers every year. I'll be honest. We have someone who defers their second year every year. So
perfect. Okay, great. Thank you for that. I appreciate it.
No problem. No problem. Sarah?
Oh, hiya. Thanks so much for this evening. You just mentioned about it becoming more regulated by the HSE. Would that be to do with core registration?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Okay, brilliant. And you also mentioned with regards to the psychometrics around the personality, that could be an extra thing for students.
Yeah, so because a lot of our students don't necessarily want it, like I suppose there's an expense. So if we put it onto the program, it goes into the fees. So essentially what we do with our service provider is they offer it at a cost basis to any students who want to do the personality training. So they either accommodate them on one of their public courses, or if we have enough demand from within the classroom, we provide them with the facilities in DCU to offer the TUP training, but you pay a significantly reduced amount to what you would pay, you know, out in the real world, so to speak. But you deal with the service provider directly. We just facilitate it.
Oh, that's great. Thanks so much. Thank you.
No problem. Ksenia?
Yeah. Hi. Kind of to follow up with Emma's question. Hi, Emma. We're in the same class.
Okay.
2 questions I have, actually. So one, you explained the workload a little bit, and I'm wondering, for undergrad, for example, there is part of the assignments, but then also there are exams that are, exams. So I'm wondering how that is handled with masters. And granted, I have no familiarity.
We don't have any exams. I don't know if you missed that in the presentation. So there's no exams. It's 100% continuous assessment. So it's only assignments, written assignments or oral presentations.
Okay, all right. And then my second question, again, following up with what Emma had started, could you maybe explain a little bit the experience necessary? So maybe if you have time, talk a little bit.
Sure.
Again, the list is on the website, but what does it entail? Like, what would be enough to get in, for example?
Yeah, so I think it's around, I suppose, a mix of experience. So we would have we do have some people who are recent graduates who have, you know, performed extremely well in their degrees, but generally they have some level of experience. They've done some internship, or, you know, they've worked in an organization, or they've tried to get into some role that exposes them to large organizations, which, you know, it's an organizational psychology, and that's that's important. But typically once people have, 3 years experience, now we're not going to fill a class of 40 people with 3 years experience, but that has never happened. So we have people who have 20 years experience, 30 years experience, and the idea is a mix. But generally, 3 years experience, as long as it's, I think it's sometimes also about what you've been able, so it could be in retail or it could be in hospitality, but it's about what have you learned about people at work through that experience. So being able to kind of share some of your learnings, through the personal statement when you apply. But again, if you're not sure, the best thing to do is to email me and talk to me about what your prospects are. And I'm happy to deal with any of those kind of queries over email or to set up a call. So
right.
I do see when you're on the lower end, the sooner you get in your application, the better, because there's fewer and fewer places for the smaller amount of experience. The more we go on, there's always space for someone who has maybe a lot of managerial experience or 20 years of experience or a wide range of organizations that they've worked in. But so I do encourage people who are on the lower end, they're not to if they're really thinking about applying, to get their application in as soon as possible.
Okay, so suppose, just to, I guess, retaliate, although I will probably reach out, if experience comes first and then person did some kind of undergraduate psychology degree, then it's not necessarily falls into the line of
That's fine.
Okay.
We're not it's flexible. People, it's in the spirit of people, and everyone's different and everyone has a different journey, so it very much recognizes that.
Okay, thank you.
Is that okay?
No, sorry.
No, that's fine. Elaine, you have a question?
Hi everyone. I was just wondering with regard to research. I remember when I was doing I have a master's already, but when I was doing my undergrad and my master's, I found it hard to really pin down research topics and develop them. And I kind of look back and kind of go, in some regards, they were kind of wasted opportunities. If I could go back now, I would have.
And do it,
Yeah, so I was just wondering, in terms of identifying research areas, and ideally, the earlier you understand what your research direction is, the better job you can do, and the more you can get out of it. But I suppose. I wouldn't have an idea yet. So
no, that's okay. Lots of people. I mean, okay, so it's funny. I had a meeting with one of our grads, and she finished, I think, in possibly 2019 or 2018. When she came out, she said the thing she misses most is doing the research piece, which she never expected. But I think we really scaffold it. That's the term I would use. So in my module, you do a lit review, but on any topic that you want. So anything that's piqued your interest in my module, that you're passionate about, that you think could be of value to you going forward, you can do your lit review on that. And that lit review requires you to identify questions that maybe haven't been answered yet, or are worth at least posing the question. And then you have a research methods module that follows on from that pretty much straight away. So you can look at, you're supported in kind of, developing those ideas, and developing questions that you want to ask, whether that's survey-based, experimental, or qualitative. And to be honest, the majority of our students end up doing qualitative research these days. But I think it's very much step one starts within a module. Step two starts with kind of explicit, instruction in research methods. And we have it's a formative session. It's not assessed in any kind of summative way, but we have a day for our students to present their research ideas on posters. And everyone walks around, and you can get in. Well, actually, that's a really interesting idea. I might do that. So we try to make this, it's learning as much as it's learning, and it's kind of being exposed to lots of different topics, and equipping that point about being an evidence-based practitioner, giving you the tools to go out and to leave this program, but to have the skills to be able to research, to be able to kind of critique things that will last with you long after you've finished the master's.
Well, at what point do people generally have their research topic identified?
So typically at the end of their first year,
all right,
so they have a research proposal. They have a research proposal, and at that point you're assigned a supervisor, and then you meet your supervisor, and 90% of people will go with the topic, and then 10% will say 3 months later, do you know what, I don't want to do this at all. So that happens. I mean, like people have different experiences, but generally you'll have been given, by the end of first year, you know roughly what you're going to be doing it on, and you'll have a full research proposal.
So you'll have the first year really to tease it out.
Yes,
and
full first year.
what's sparking your interest. And
yeah, exactly.
Okay. Yep. Thanks.
Great. So hopefully everyone has my email address. You know where to find me. You know, I'm happy to follow up on any individual questions that you might not want to ask in this forum, or you go away and you're like, why did I not ask that? And I think what's really important is I can tell you what it's like to stand at the top of the classroom, and I can see what the program does for students, and I can tell you how much we all love teaching onto this program. But actually it's the students that will tell you what it will be like for you. So I do really encourage I can make those connections for any of you who are interested in following an application for the course.